Or are you trying to learn a new language, but you're just not able to remember or memorize any words? Well, I've been there, so let's talk about it. My name is Ein. I'm an American polyglot who's been learning languages for 8 years now, and I now speak 7 languages. And I know exactly how it feels to start learning a new language, study all the vocabulary, all the grammar, all the rules, you name it, and then the next time you go to speak the language, you just don't remember a thing. But the good news is, it's not impossible. If you've been trying to learn and memorize vocabulary in a new language by just repeating it to yourself constantly, or reading long lists of vocabulary sheets, or using just plain and simple flashcards where you look at it and then look at the meaning of it right afterwards, well, you're going about it the wrong way. The secret to memorizing vocabulary isn't actual memorization. It's learning the skills that you need to recognize and understand words. And if you can master these skills, well, you enable yourself to learn vocabulary at a much faster pace than just sitting around and trying to memorize individual words and definitions. There are other ways to memorize vocabulary if the traditional route doesn't work for you. That's helped me enormously. And maybe it'll help you too. So in this video, we're going to talk about the best ways to memorize new vocabulary in another language. So yeah, let's get into it. Alright, so the first method that I like to use to memorize new vocabulary when I'm learning a language is called studying in context. Now, some of you might be familiar with this term and some of you may not. But what it essentially means is using the context in a paragraph or a sentence in order to guess the meaning of the vocabulary word that you are trying to learn. For example, if you take the English phrase, he broke a twig off of the tree and used it to start a fire, and you don't know the meaning of the word twig, well, you can use the context in this case to assume that a twig is the branch of a tree, a small part of the tree. Now, this is a really good way to learn and memorize new vocabulary because when you're reading a book or when you're speaking to people, you can use the context of that speech, of that text, in order to assume the meanings of words that are unfamiliar to you. And once you develop this skill, you'll not only be able to accurately assume the meaning of most unfamiliar words to help fill up your vocabulary, but you'll also be able to complete your own sentences because you'll start to realize that a lot of the words that you are now assuming the meaning of are words that you are now beginning to use yourself. And this is a natural part of language learning. And all of this goes to show that context is very important. A lot of people will learn a language and try to speak in a new language the same way they do in their original language, in their native language. But that just doesn't work. And that's why context is so important, not just when you are speaking, but also when you are reading text in another language or you are listening to speech in another language. And this applies to all words. Whenever you learn a new word, make sure that it is in context. Not only can you use the context to bolster your knowledge, but it also gives your brain more to work with. And in the future, you'll have that context behind the word when you encounter it or decide to use it yourself. The second method that I like to use to memorize vocabulary is to use cognates. Taking advantage of cognates is the best thing that you can do when trying to learn large amounts of vocabulary at once. Now, of course, this really only applies to languages that you are learning that are in the same group as another language that you know. So this is really only useful if you speak an Indo-European language and you're learning another Indo-European language. Or perhaps if you're learning a Semitic language and you already know another Semitic language. There are a lot of cognates that exist between languages in the same language family. For example, in English and Spanish, there are enormous amounts of words that are the exact same and mean the exact same thing. For example, to attack in English would translate into Spanish as atacar, and to use in English would translate into Spanish as usar. And this can allow you to learn large amounts of vocabulary at once because it all resembles vocabulary that you already know. But there's nuance to this. A lot of words in languages of the same language family will also resemble one another but not have the exact same meaning. So having a good understanding of your own native language can help you learn others. For example, the word castigar in Spanish means to punish, and that closely resembles the English word to castigate, which is a fairly old word. Nobody really says it anymore. But if you know the meaning of to castigate, then you can draw parallels between that word and its Spanish equivalent, its Spanish cognate, and understand the meaning. It's a lot easier to memorize words that already look like words that you know. And the third method that I like to use is studying roots. Word roots are usually consistent in most languages around the world. And so if you can learn the roots of words, then you give yourself the tools that you need to learn an enormous amount of vocabulary without ever having to actually memorize lists of words. Because this will allow you to look at a word, recognize its individual parts, and know the exact meaning, or at least be able to infer what it means. For example, the ending ity in English words, such as in words like density, intensity, and quality, all mean the same thing. This ending tells you that the word has to do with the quality or the state of something. And if you can recognize that when looking at a word, that gives you a huge advantage when it comes to inferring its meaning. And the same exercise can be done in other languages. For example, in Spanish, you have the exact same thing. In Spanish, the ending ity becomes dad, and the words are the exact same. Densidad, intensidad, calidad, and all of these words share that same ending, which means the state of something or the quality of something. And if you can learn word roots like that, then you don't even have to learn the word. You just have to look and find the word root, and you'll know more or less what it means. In my opinion, this is the best way to memorize vocabulary words, and that's exactly what I do. I've been able to use my understanding and knowledge of just a few word roots in each language to learn absolutely absurd amounts of vocabulary in all the languages that I speak. So it's a pretty consistent way to learn and memorize vocabulary. And finally, the fourth best method to quickly learn and memorize vocabulary in a new language is to just practice. And honestly, all three of the methods that I've shared with you before this one can kind of be summed together into this one, because if done correctly, all three of them apply to this method. A lot of people struggle with confidence when speaking in a new language, and that's arguably the biggest barrier that people face when learning a new language. But if you can gain the confidence to speak and practice, irregardless of the errors that you might make, then you'll learn vocabulary and memorize it faster than any other way. Because by speaking, you'll begin to recognize words that resemble words in your native language. By speaking, you'll begin to recognize word roots, and you'll be able to infer words in the future using those very same roots. And by practicing and speaking, you'll also be able to study in context, because you'll learn more words, you'll know more words, you'll be actively using more words, and as a result, when you encounter a new word, you'll be able to use context to infer what it means. And by speaking, you force yourself to do so at a faster pace. When you're just sitting there and reading a book, or when you're just sitting there playing a YouTube video at half speed, well, you give yourself time to think. But when you practice with a native speaker, or you practice with someone in real time, you force yourself to think a lot faster. You force yourself to use the language faster. And so you enable yourself to use all of these tools at once at a much faster pace. And ultimately, that's what's going to help you learn a language, memorize vocabulary, and make leaps and bounds in your progress. And remember, like I said at the beginning of this video, learning vocabulary isn't about learning the actual words, it's about learning the skills that you need to recognize and understand them. And there you have it. Those are some of the best methods that I found to learn and memorize new vocabulary when learning a new language. Now I know that this video might not be as clear to some as it may be to others, and so if you have any other questions, then feel free to leave those down in the comments below, and I'll do my best to get to each and every one of them. Because after all, this channel is all about inspiring other people to learn other languages and helping people gain the resources and skills that they need to learn languages in the best way possible. And so I hope that you guys enjoyed this video and that you gained something new from this video. If you did, then don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment with your thoughts down below, and share the video, because that helps me beat the algorithm and get more content up on the channel. That being said, thanks everyone for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Goodbye.